Global recession fear is kicking into high gear this Friday. Equities selling off around the world. Tough day in Asia, tough day in Europe and in the United States. Lakshman, he's the managing director of the Economic Cycle Research Institute, here with us now to break it down. The latest note, first of all, you guys called a recession quite a long time ago, and in the latest note you say the business cycle upturn is, quote, nowhere in sight. Right. What does that mean? How nervous should people be?
Well, I think a certain degree of nervousness is absolutely appropriate, because we're going to see a slower economy for the next couple of quarters. That's baked in the cake. There's nothing you can do about that. And the reason we say that there's no business cycle upturn in sight is the same way that we forecast the recession. It's using forward-looking leading indicators of the economy, the drivers of the economy. Right. Things like housing, like confidence, like money, interest rates, jobs, profits, all of these things, when you take them together, give you a very clear signal as to the future direction of the economy. Right now, that continues to be to the downside. In fact, it's accelerated a bit to the downside.
Well, I think it's interesting in this note from ECRI this week, you say the leading employment index and the home price index anticipates any resolution of these problems for the foreseeable future. There is no resolution for the foreseeable future. That's a very scary thought.
Yeah, well, that is what happens when you're in a recession, and one that looks, in this case, you see, we're in a global recession, so it's probably going to be longer than the last couple of recessions we had, which were not as global. We had a couple of 8-month recessions. This recession, being global, may look something like the recession we had in the early 80s or the mid-70s. And those recessions lasted about 16 months.
Let's talk about how global this is, because, you know, the big news out this Friday is that there was that contraction in Britain's economy. We haven't seen something like it for some 16 years, so people are starting to think this is really hitting some of the leading economies around the world. It is no longer about the U.S.
Right, and that's very consistent with kind of the experience we had in the early 80s, where Britain was also in a recession alongside the U.S., alongside Europe, alongside Asia. You're going to see more and more GDP numbers, industrial production numbers, profits numbers, jobs numbers out of these regions, which are going to be weak, the same as that we're seeing here in the U.S.
You know what I think is really telling, and not everyone's talking about it, but that we don't see any flight to quality right now. We see OPEC cut oil production and oil prices go down. They wanted to boost prices. We see gold and copper and these hard commodities falling as well. How big of an indicator is that about the state that we're really in?
Well, I mean, what's happening to a degree is you're also having there may be some technical things in the funds where the funds, investors like you and me, are saying, we're going to take our money out of the funds, and so then the funds are forced to redeem, and in some cases they're going to have to sell things they don't want to sell. Right. But I think stepping back for a second, right, what's particularly telling here, I think there's a misconception that we're going into a global recession because of the financial panic and the credit market freeze that we had over the past month. That's not true. The forward-looking leading indicators that I just discussed in June were pointing to a global recession well before the financial panic. So the financial panic of late has simply made it a bit more severe. And that's a slightly different orientation on what's going on here.
Let's end on this. You call it really sort of a jobs recession. How big is employment a part of this?
Oh, it's a big part. I mean, basically an economy, generally speaking, is how much do you produce and how many people are working. Yeah. And you have to have people working, otherwise you can't buy stuff. And so here we're seeing the jobless rate. It's risen already quite a bit from the low 4s to the low 6s. It's going to go much higher. I think much higher than people think. I don't think 8% or higher is out of the question at all in this cycle.
No relief in sight for housing, no relief in sight for jobs.
Yeah, I think the best we can hope for is an upturn somewhere out in 09, but we don't have objective evidence from the leading indicators yet.
All right, buckle up, a long way to go.
Buckle up.
Lakshman, thank you.
Thank you.